Tęsime laidą Nauja diena, kalbėsime apie tai, kaip Izraelis atlaiko tarptautinį spaudimą stabdyti puolimą Gazoje. Prieš keletą dienų Nauja dienoje kalbėjome apie tai, kad Jungtinės valstijos prisijungia prie balsų, kurie skatina Izraelį daryti pauzę. Ir šiandien kalbėsime su Izraelio ambasadore Hadas Wittenberg Silverstein. Ambassador, great to have you in our studio.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
It's been 6 months since the conflict started and escalated big time. Where did those 6 months take us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we are almost 6 months. It's happened in October 7th, and this is really the start. It took us some time for Israel to start operating in Gaza, but I think that there is a clear understanding that this is really the only way to act, and in order to prevent such an atrocities to happen again, I just want to remind, because again, it's happened already a few months ago, but it was a huge terror attack that took place at that time. The Hamas terrorists killed more than 1,200 Israelis on that day. They entered the Israeli territory, they invaded the kibbutzim and villages across the border. They entered the houses, they burned houses, they mutilated body, they killed whole families. I mean, this was a huge attack, and that's why we have to act and to force there.
So throughout those 6 months, how would you describe the operation and its success? Could there have been any alternatives in the operation?
Of course that, we are doing our best not to harm civilians, but still we have to remember that unfortunately Hamas is embedded within the civilians, and Hamas is operating from within schools, hospitals, neighborhoods. So of course that there are also casualties on that side. We are doing any effort in order not to harm people, to warn them, to evacuate them, to bring supplies, humanitarian supplies into Gaza. But this is definitely not an easy situation, not for the people there, not for the people in Israel.
Trumpai išversiu tai, kas buvo pasakyta. Ambasadorė teigia, jog tai, kas atsitiko prieš beveik 6 mėnesius, reiškia, jog reikia pradėti veikti Gazoje, nes kitaip vėl Izraeliui kyla pavojus. Tuomet įvyko didžiulė teroro ataka, buvo deginami namai, žudomos šeimos. Ir šiuo metu Izraelis savo operacijos metu teigia, darantis ką gali, kad nepakenktų civiliams. Jais prisidengia Hamas ligoninėse, mokyklose, tai lemia civilių žūtis, nors Izraelio operacijos metu stengiamasi įspėti žmonės, juos evakuoti, ir bet kokiu atveju toje situacija nėra lengva. A lot of international reactions in this conflict, and now a warning, a draft resolution in the Security Council from the United States. What does that mean? Where will that lead?
It's hard to say at this point. I mean, there is a humanitarian crisis going on in Gaza, but we all have to remember that this humanitarian crisis can be ended at once Hamas will surrender, and once Hamas will release the hostages. There are still 134 hostages that are being kept for almost 6 months within the Gaza Strip. So, of course, there is a worry about humanitarian efforts. I do want to shed light in order to emphasize that, as I mentioned before, we are doing a lot of effort in order to let humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. I can tell you, Ignas, that since we started this operation, we had more than 17,600 trucks entering into Gaza, carrying more than 320,000 tons of humanitarian food and supplies and aid. So there is no limit on the scope of humanitarian aid entering into Gaza. However, there is a huge problem, and this is maybe the link of that, when it comes to UN bodies or humanitarian organizations, and mainly UNRWA, that are supposed to distribute, but they are not really doing their job probably. So we can stop here, and then maybe I will give another example.
Okay, sure. Trumpas vėlgi vertimas to, kas buvo ką tik pasakyta. Pripažįsta Izraelis, kad yra humanitarinė krizė, tačiau ją galima iš tiesų iki galo pabaigti tik sunaikinant Hamas. Ambasadorės teigimu, Hamas vis dar turi 134 įkaitus savo žinioje. Hamas pasidavimas smarkiai prisidėtų prie tos humanitarinės krizės išsprendimo, lygiai taip pat kaip įkaitų paleidimas. Stengiasi Izraelio pusė įleisti humanitarinę pagalbą į Gazos Ruožą. 17 400 sunkvežimių jau buvo atvykę gabendami 320 tonų maisto ir vandens į Gazos Ruožą, taip stengiantis švelninti humanitarinę situaciją. Didžioji dalis perspėjimų atkeliauja ambasadorius teigimu iš jungtinių tautų struktūrų, kurios ir pačios ne iki galo padaro savo darbą. So, let's proceed with an example.
I will give just two examples, from the recent days. Just yesterday, on March 20th, there were 199 trucks that entered into Gaza. Of course, that we have to scan them in order to make sure that no ammunition will enter. But once they entered, unfortunately, only 120 of these trucks were distributed. The day before, on March 19th, 248 trucks went into the Gaza Strip. From them, only 126 were distributed. So we can already understand that we have a problem with distribution and managing this humanitarian help. Add into that Hamas, that is still controlling some of the parts in the Gaza Strip, is unfortunately not allowing the people, the civilians, to get into the trucks. Sometimes they are stealing the supplies, giving that to their people instead of the civilians. Sometimes they charge money from the civilians in order to get this humanitarian help that was donated. So there are lots of troubles. But again, it's very easy to put the blame on us, but it's not only up to, not to the IDF, not to Israel.
So is the problem Hamas that are stealing and then selling the aid to the civilians, or can UN do something more from their side as well, or other bodies that are distributing the aid?
So all of the above, because eventually, the central main body that's supposed to take care of the civilian population is UNRWA. It's a UN agency formed and giving services to Palestinians. Unfortunately, they are not doing their job properly for many, many years. Not only that, and not only with the current situation, but I can tell you that we know about 1,500 employees of UNRWA that are members either of Hamas or of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. I can give you examples of quite a few of them that took part in the terror attack that took place on October 7th. Of course, that their facilities are being used by Hamas in order to launch rockets and to keep ammunition. And I think that what is disturbing most of all is that they're also in charge of education. And if you will take a look in their books, you will find a lot of, hate, false materials, incitement about Israel. This is not the way, to bring a change to this region. And that's why, unfortunately, UNRWA is part of the problem and not of the solution. So I do believe that there are other bodies who can take over and bring, some hope for the Palestinians.
Vėlgi trumpai išverčiant tai, kas buvo pasakyta, jungtinių tautų atstovai, konkrečiau kalbant UNRWA, United Nations Relief and Works Agency. Šis juridinis vienetas, kuris užsiima humanitarinės pagalbos teikimu Gazos ruožui, ambasadorės teigimu sukuria situaciją ir dėl Hamas veiksmų, ir dėl savo veiksmų arba jų nebuvimo kai kuriais atvejais. Tokia, kad, pavyzdžiui, vakar 180 humanitarinės pagalbos vienetų pasiekė regioną, 120 buvo išdalinti, dar prieš tai 208 ir 106 yra vagiami tie resursai arba parduodami per Hamas civiliams. Ir apskritai, kalbant apie šią organizaciją, ambasadorės teigimu, apie 1500 žmonių, kurie darbuojasi su UNRWA, taip pat yra ir džihado atstovai, Hamas nariai, padėjo ir atakos metu šiek tiek šioms organizacijoms, atakos prieš Izraelį, kurie ir sukūrė visą konfliktą regione. Taip pat jie rūpinasi švietimu Gazos Ruože, medžiagoje, kuri naudojama mokant daug neapykantos žydams, ir tai nėra kelias pokyčiams, tai dalis problemos, o nesprendimo, ambasadorės teigimu. So, keeping in mind all of those facts about what you said, education, the whole hate directed from the Gaza Strip probably towards Israel. What's the long-term solution in this? Now, I mean, we have those warnings, we have the international community probably shifting a little bit. How do you see the long-term situation here?
For the long term, I mean, we are there to stay and Palestinians are there to stay. And I think that an only solution could come when both sides will acknowledge, the right of the other side to live there in peace. And I think that in that sense, it's important that the international community will be involved. But it is also, I think, very clear to everyone that terror organizations such as Hamas and others, or Hezbollah in our northern borders, cannot be part of it. And I think that, in that sense, it's important to continue and to support other parts of Palestinian society in order to bring it at some point. But again, there are levels that need to be handled, and the first one is this question of security. Of course, at the same time, releasing the hostages, and eventually coming up with a further step in order to find some solution. I think that again, we deserve it, and they deserve it.
Some say that it seems like the only option to destroy Hamas completely is just to wipe Gaza Strip out of the map. Would you agree? I mean, what's the what's the question really here? I know you wouldn't agree, but
no, I think that
how would you answer
it's even something that we cannot take part in really in a serious discussion. We are not talking about wiping anyone out of the map. This is unquestionable. Gaza is full of civilians, of children, of women that again, they totally deserve a way better life than what their current leadership is offering. I do think that it requires a lot of efforts. It's not up to Israel. There is, Arab moderate world, and there is an international community. And I think that, over the last 18 years, Hamas was controlling the Strip. So much money came into the Gaza Strip, and unfortunately it wasn't used in order to improve the life or infrastructures of Palestinians, but in order to create more and more, terror. And in that sense, I think that, the good intentions should continue, but totally shifted to another direction in order to work with, those moderate powers within the society and to improve it. But definitely, military is one means in order to tackle Hamas and to hurt their infrastructure. But the idea is not to distract all the others.
Thank you very much for this conversation. Dar trumpas vertimas to, kas buvo pasakyta baigiant pokalbį apie ilgojo laikotarpio sprendimą. Klausiau aš, ambasadorė atsakė, kad mes liksime ten ir palestiniečiai liks toje vietovėje. Abi pusės privalo pripažinti viena kitos egzistavimą, tačiau teroristų organizacija tame dialoge dalyvauti negali. Taip pat ambasadorė buvo paklausta apie tai, kur yra tas galbūt aukso vidurys, kalbant apie karo veiksmus ir Hamas sunaikinimą, tai vėlgi apie diskusijos poreikį, kurią palaikytų ir tarptautinė bendruomenė, buvo kalbėta ir apie tai, kad apsaugant civilius esančius Gazos ruože reikia vis dėlto siekti to, kad būtų paleisti įkaitai ir Hamas įtaka ten susilpninta. Tai tiek šiame pokalbyje, visiškai netrukus dar tęsime laidą Nauja diena ir bendrausime su Lietuvos žurnalistų sąjungos pirmininku Benjaminu Netanyahu. Likite įsijungę Lietuvos ryto televiziją.